Moving on to other news now, and more than a third of tweets supporting Donald Trump ahead of last year's US election were generated by bots. A report by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute claims bots and fake news are threatening democracy at a scale never seen before. We're now joined by the report's author, analyst at ASPI's International Cyber Policy Centre, Zoe Hawkins. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, you say that the security of our election infrastructure is at stake. It's threatening our voting system. Just explain to us what you mean by this.
Oh, absolutely. I think, firstly, I'd like to distinguish two important factors that are at play in modern election security, two of which you've just touched on, but they're importantly distinct. So firstly, there's the practical security, the cybersecurity, if you will, of our election infrastructure, which would be the voting booths and all the practical processes that take place on election day to count all the votes. And then the second part, which is what I try and articulate in this report, is about the process that goes into people forming their voting decisions, and that's in the shaping of public opinion before election day, which is where things like fake news and bots come into play as well.
Well, let's break it down then individually, and let's first talk about the electronic infrastructure. How do you see that actually affecting Australia's elections or coming elections? You say that this could actually affect the voting booth.
Well, that's right, and I think knowledge of the vulnerabilities of electronic voting booths has been around for a while, with demonstrations of how easily they can be manipulated. Having said that, while it's very important that democracies, in Australia being no exception, that we are aware of that and invest in making sure that all those systems are as secure as possible. That certainly is probably a lower order concern, I would say, at this stage than the more complex issue of the influence of public opinion and how that's shaped through the fake news and the bots on social media.
It's been widely said that fake news was used during the US presidential campaign, and many say that that is how President Trump was able to get into the White House. Fake news has always been in the headlines of late. Explain to us, in very simple terms, what you would describe as fake news.
Fake news would be I suppose, objectively incorrect information that is being passed off as fact under the guise of a news agency that would be of sort of a lower responsibility, or potentially under the fact that so many people now on social media have the voice to express opinion that it's quite hard to distinguish amongst all the noise as to what is reputable information and what is not.
Well, indeed. Well, where is that line between fake news and opinion pieces?
Well, that's exactly right, and I think that's part of the policy challenge I try and point to in the report, is pointing out that addressing fake news isn't really a simple issue, because it will quickly run into challenging the freedom of speech, which is what the internet has offered as such a great benefit to everybody.
That being the case, how can one then be sure that what they are reading is not exactly fake news?
Well, that's again, something that I think we all need to be very mindful of, is equipping ourselves to understand what might be some of the signs of fake news, being a bit more critical when we're reading the information that's presented to us online.
Well, what are the signs of fake news then?
I think it is, if something is a very extreme claim, it's always best to make sure that you can find it in multiple sources, looking at how reputable or established the news source is in itself and what biases might be at play.
Are there any legislations that can be strengthened to weed out fake news?
I'm not aware of any specific legislative changes that could be made in Australia at this stage, but I think it's a conversation we have to have nationally as to where we want to draw that line. Some countries in Europe, Germany in particular, are moving to put the responsibility on companies such as Facebook to be responsible for the content that is being put up online on their platform, and implementing fines for allowing fake news to be propagated.
It has been said that there's a new form of election campaigning, and in the form of Twitter bots and algorithms. This is something that French President Emmanuel Macron also used while he was campaigning. So is it just as wrong when the favourable candidate, shall we say, uses this to their advantage?
Not at all. I think it's important to note that bot technology in and of itself is not inherently good or bad. I think it's something that we just have to be aware of, that can be used to make a certain opinion seem more popular than it is. So it's nothing wrong with it. A lot of other automated accounts are used by lots of different companies for lots of different purposes. So it's not inherently bad. It's just something that I think as a Twitter user, for example, it's helpful to understand that account might not represent as many people as it seems to.
Zoe Hawkins, thank you for your insight.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.